Welcome to the Wellford Podcast. I'm your host, Josh Roberts. I'm the Chief Business Officer and a co-founder at Wellford. In this series, we explore the evolving world of medical cannabis through real patient stories, expert perspectives, and insights from healthcare professionals and growers. The views shared by our guests are their own and may not reflect those of Wellford.
All right. We are live. Hello, Anton. Welcome to the Wellford Podcast. Hi.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, super excited to be here.
Yeah, good to see you again. Wondering if, just to kick this off, maybe you can give a quick intro to who you are, who are Karoo Bioscience, and just, over to you.
Absolutely. So my name is Anton Huysamer. I am the head grower or cultivation manager or master grower at Karoo Bioscience, but I prefer definitely not to be called master grower. I have been with the company now for a bit over 5 years. We joined back in 2020, and at that point, there was no facility. It was just a massive dirt platform, and we were there since the build out, the licensing process, and the beginning of production. Up until now. So it's been an incredible, fruitful 5 years. We've learned so much. My history or my background is actually entomology. So I'm an entomologist. I'm a bug guy. And there's a very cool overlap between insects and agriculture. And that's how I kind of fell into the agricultural space. That's sort of a nutshell of where we're at. We're a facility in the Western Cape of Southern Africa, in South Africa. And we are in what is known as the Klein Karoo region, which is an incredibly arid area of the country. It's a little bit like Mars, the landscape, but it's absolutely beautiful, breathtaking location. We're incredibly rural. I mean, we're 40 kilometers from the nearest tar road. We don't have a petrol station or a bank in our town. I mean, we're really far out there. And it was just the perfect location to build an absolute massive spaceship with which we could grow medicinal cannabis. So,
Yeah, I remember bumping into you guys. So I was in Johannesburg. I'd made a trip down to visit as many growers in South Africa who I could meet. And one of my friends mentioned you guys. And so when I went to Cape Town, I didn't realize how long it was going to take to get to you guys. So I thought I'd go to Cape Town, quick drive. But no, I had to fly to George and then drive 4 hours to you guys. And
yes.
I remember the fellow who picked me up, who works with you guys, was a super interesting guy. And I think we were going like 180 kilometers an hour for 4 hours. It was an unbelievable experience, but I agree. I mean, it's like Mars. It's just, it goes on forever. And it's just like small shrub plants, very different from anything that I've ever seen. And then you just come on to this amazing spaceship, as you say, and what a beautiful facility. I mean, from the moment I got there, I was really impressed with everything and how everything ran. And I met your CEO, Duran, and then I met you and you walked me around. And that was the beginning of the relationship. I mean, it's been a good relationship so far. And we're really excited to kind of build upon what we've already started here. But first question here, can you just walk us through your cultivation process at Karoo, from the genetics that you guys select through to harvest?
Absolutely. So we're a large multi-span greenhouse. The facility in total is 6,600 square meters, which is 71,000 square feet. And it consists of a majority the greenhouse space where we use natural light and the artificial lighting to grow our flowering crops. But we also have an indoor space, which we dedicate to our nursery. That's where we do our propagation and the beginning of our vegetative phase. Coupled with that indoor space, we have our GMP portion of the facility, which is almost entirely separate from what we do. We almost consider each other separate companies at this point. We're a very large scale producer. We have an incredibly rigorous production schedule. I mean, we fill our flowering rooms on a 2-week cycle and we harvest every 2 weeks. And we stagger our production in a way that a flowering room is only empty for a period of 5 days, where we do a deep sanitation, a deep clean, a flushing of all our lines, a reset of the room. And then by the time that room has been harvested, cleaned, and is ready for the next plants, the plants just flow out of the nursery into that. So it's just absolute clockwork, crop after crop. And that's how we just run our cycles, particularly through the peak of the summer when we have maximum sunlight, we just absolutely maximize production. And yes, as I mentioned, we're in an incredibly arid region of the country and it gets very, very hot. I mean, today is a balmy 36 degrees Celsius, standard for January. I mean, we often peak over into February with high 40s or mid to low 40s. It's very common for us. So when it comes to genetics, our selection is trying to always prioritize plants that are just absolute units that can handle high temperatures, that can handle stressful environments, that can handle this incredibly rigorous production cycle. So our selection is almost entirely based on how well that crop can do in our location. I often make an analogy where if you take a Ferrari, I mean, it's an absolute wonderful car, but you're not going to take a Ferrari and drive it in the Dakar. It's not going to work there. And so very similarly for us, when we do our selections, whether we hunt from seed or we bring genetics in from other suppliers, we first do many small scale runs to make sure the plant can handle the environment and our production schedule. And then once it gets the green light, we scale it up, grow a bunch of mothers of it and take our clones in order to then fill our flowering lists. We have, yeah, sure.
No, I was just going to say, good. Yeah. Okay. Go on.
Awesome. So we do like I mentioned, it's a 2-week cycle. We take 4,000 clones every 2 weeks. We have a propagation phase in the nursery, which is our controlled environment, our indoor space. We do our propagation there for a period of, we expect full roots by 11 days, the plants to be fully hardened off by 18 days, and then they're ready to enter the vegetative cycle in the nursery. In that space, we have ebb and flow tables. We do very high density growing, so we can just maximize the number of plants in a very small area. And we then grow them there for a period of about 17 days. They absolutely explode in that period. It's unbelievable to go from a clone to a full veg plant in that period of time. It still blows my mind how quickly these plants can grow. When you just push the pedal and you give it everything it needs, it's just absolutely amazing. And then after it's vegged in the nursery, we then take it out to the Karoo, to the greenhouse for the first time. And that's not environmentally controlled to the degree that our indoor facility is, obviously. So that's where it really is super important that these plants can handle these high temperature days, that they can handle the intensity of our production. And all of our selections so far have been very successful. There's 1 or 2 that we no longer produce because they didn't perform well. We're very, I would say, almost ruthless in the manner in which we get rid of plants that don't fit our production schedule. We're incredibly selective about it. So we will never grow something that won't work for us. And then, we flower for a 7 to 8 week cycle, 2,500 plants in a production batch. We harvest the whole room in a single day, which is something that we've strived to reach and we've been doing successfully now for the last 2 years. If you asked me 4 years ago, I would have said it was physically impossible to do that, but we're doing it now consistently every single 2 weeks. Those plants are then sent through to the GMP portion of the facility where they are dried under extremely stringent conditions. We have a 2-phase drying process where we do the initial dry, and then we switch over to phase 2, which is a much longer, gradual drying phase. We then do our curing in the same rooms under, again, much similar conditions where we do a long, slow cure. And once the plants have reached the ideal water content, we then move them over into the trimming phase where we trim. We do almost exclusively hand trimming depending on the intensity of our production season, but vast majority of our crops are trimmed by hand. And then once trimmed, we package up, send them away for COAs, and then we send them around the world to whoever buys them.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I remember being shown around by you and just really being impressed by how much you can really talk eloquently about this whole process and about, each little detail of the grow. I also remember meeting you about 2 feet away from the front door and having to completely change my clothes. So it was very evident to me that you guys took this very seriously in terms of plant cleanliness and your facility's cleanliness as a whole. So, that was really interesting, and it's stuck out to me very much so. And I told everybody when I came home, I was just like, oh, these guys they're serious about making sure their babies are safe and do not get contaminated. So Yeah, that was a really interesting one. I mean, maybe you can speak just a little bit about, and I think it kind of ties into the EU GMP side of your business, but why you guys take plant security and cleanliness so incredibly seriously.
Absolutely. So I guess it all boils down to risk assessment and risk mitigation. That is the primary focus of a quality department. It's the primary focus of the cultivation department. It's the primary focus of the maintenance department. We're all trying to avoid risk. And having someone step in from outside, just enter in their civilian clothes and walk through your pristine facility is an absolute risk. I mean, they could have been frolicking in a compost pile before they came, or they may, like sometimes we have growers come visit. Maybe they were in their own grow, in their own location, and they bring pests and diseases with them on their clothes or on their shoes. So it's absolutely paramount to make sure that you reduce that risk by just ensuring that people can't just walk into your facility. So most of it is controlled through access control. We have these little bands that open doors for us to move through. And if you don't have the right access, you simply cannot enter that space. And then, as you mentioned, as you enter the facility, there's a shoe gowning process followed by an overcoat and a hairnet and a beard net process. And then you immediately step into an air shower, which isolates the changing area from the rest of the indoor facility. We have more air showers between the GACP portion and the GMP portion. So yes, absolutely. It's cleanliness is next to godliness. It is so important in our industry, and it's super critical to make sure that the plants are safe, the product is good, and we don't bring in unnecessary contaminants. It's absolutely critical.
Yeah, great. I mean, one of the other things I noticed right off the bat was, kind of the warmth and welcoming nature of Duran and of many of the other people from your company. And I feel like he's done a great job to create this sense of almost family-like feeling in that company. You guys are so far away from the nearest town or city, and it's like a compound or a community there. And I mean, that has a effect on the plants, I'm sure, right? I mean, that's a little bit esoteric, but I mean, maybe, we don't have to go to the esoteric side, but maybe just speak about, the ethos that Duran has put in place at Karoo and just how that affects day to day, working there.
Absolutely. I mean, he's a wonderful man. Like he's truly, he brought us all together in this location, and he gave us this vision of this project. And initially, we had all underestimated really the scale of what it was going to be, but he already knew, and he had envisioned it, and he had planned for it. One of the ethos of the company, and it's sort of really deeply embedded in our culture, is a strong do-it-yourself attitude. And that means don't necessarily just go to the leading professional and ask them how to do it. It's more valuable to try and learn how to do it, try to do it yourself. If you make mistakes, you do what we call you pay school fees. You learn at a cost, but then you improve for the next round. And that's massively important. So we're bringing all of these young professionals in, people who aren't necessarily even remotely related to the cannabis industry, but we bring them into this location. We have this beautiful system that we want everyone to slot into, and so far it's going incredibly well. We have all these independent teams, which at the same time are fully integrating to one another's daily processes and daily interactions. And when you say that we're all one big family, it's super, super accurate actually, because majority of our labor comes from the small town of Van Wyksdorp, which is, it's 10 kilometers from where we are. And there, a lot of the people are family. I mean, we have cousins on the same team and husbands and wives in different departments. When you live it's so rurally, and you have 1,000 people in the nearby town to hire from. And I think we're sitting at about 110 people. We're hiring about 1/10 of the town. So there's inevitably going to be family working together. And that definitely has a dynamic. It absolutely has a dynamic. So yeah, we just have this strong do-it-yourself attitude. We believe in learning. We look at people's potential over their experience. And that coupled together with our can-do attitude is really what's driving the company forward at the aggressive rate at which we're expanding and at which we're just being successful. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, you can tell. I mean, that when people come together as a team, it's just such a strong feeling. And so I love that about what he's putting and what you are putting in place there. So congrats at that, being able to build such a family environment. I mean, you mentioned a little bit about the climate and the altitude, the soil, basically like what's going on with the Karoo Desert. How are you guys, and you mentioned a little bit about it, but what do you really need to do to combat the outside world and how kind of arid it is? Like compared to other greenhouse growers, what are you guys doing differently?
So it's incredibly interesting. We're just doing what any agricultural entity would do in an arid region. So if you were to go look at pepper production in Saudi Arabia, they would have almost exactly the same technology that we have. It is just heat mitigation measures. And it's usually coupled with the selection of the genetics that you grow. So I would say first and foremost, we select plants that can handle our more arid and tough environments. We have the nursery, which is indoor, which allows us to build this framework, this foundation of a healthy, strong plant that can then go out into these more harsh environments and still thrive. So that is definitely a huge component, is those 17 days that we can grow them in the nursery, we really maximize their potential. We get them to be the strongest, healthiest plants that we can. When it comes to the flowering rooms themselves, our main mitigation strategy is air movement. I mean, we purge the room through extraction fans. That air can either just be the outside air that is then filtered and brought into the building, or it gets passed through a wet wall, which is a method of adding moisture and rapidly cooling the air. I mean, we can take 45 degrees Celsius air and turn it into 30 degrees Celsius air almost instantaneously. And that's a massive tool for us. We have various shading techniques that we can use on extremely rough days. And on top of that, also, we just have incredible irrigation strategies. We make sure that we are never allowing the plant to not have exactly what it needs at exactly the right time. So all of it just science driven, all of it just standard good agricultural practices in arid environments. And we're just trying to employ that here where we are. The difference between us and other crops is I think we use a lot more light than any other crop. Cannabis is incredibly light hungry. And so we add a lot of supplemental light on top of the insane amount of natural light that we get out here. And that obviously also adds a lot of heat. So it's a pro and con situation, but we're always balancing it. We're always interpreting the environmentals and making sure that we're never going beyond a point that the plant can't handle.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the product that you guys produce is wonderful for the environment that it's coming from and the way that you use the supplemental light. I mean, how do you think growing in South Africa, I mean, what are the pros and cons when exporting to Europe or the rest of the world? What have you seen that's kind of been great and not so great about growing in South Africa for the export market?
Absolutely. So, I mean, climate is a huge. We can produce year round. We don't have white out winters. We have what is generally a Mediterranean climate on the west coast and a slightly more subtropical environment on the east coast. All of that allows for year round production. So that means we can produce a substantial amount of medicinal cannabis throughout the growing year. And that's a massive game changer. I mean, if you compare it to some places in the Northern Hemisphere, like Canada, for instance, if it gets winter there, it gets cold, it gets dark, and plants like these struggle to grow in those environments without a massive amount of power input and huge infrastructure demands. So it allows us to comparatively produce flower throughout the year at a very high quality, at a very low power consumption. Speaking of power, I mean, we produce 85% of our annual power usage is coming from the sun right now, which is absolutely enormous. And especially at our scale, it is game changing. We can utilize the sunlight to our advantage. We have an incredible solar array outside, which allows us to run all of these supplemental lights, all of the HVAC for GMP, all of the electricity across the whole of site, essentially for free. I mean, we're running at a point where if it's a really sunny day like today, there's too much power generation. We can't even handle it all. It's truly incredible. So that's something that's also a game changer. On top of that, also, I think a huge factor for us is that because we're a third world country and the Southern Hemisphere third world country, labor is incredibly cheap, comparatively speaking. So for us to have a hand trimming team, a processing team dedicated to hand trimming, which is incredibly labor intensive, takes a very long time, takes a lot of hands, we can afford that because of our country's situation. You wouldn't be able to necessarily have the same size team in other countries and other locations. So that's also a huge game changer for us. And then I guess finally also just relative location on the planet. We're directly south of Europe, so it's very easy for us to get product to you guys, where if it's from other places in the Southern Hemisphere, it's a little bit more of a journey, a little bit more logistically challenging, and obviously comes with costs. So yeah, there's a number of reasons for it.
Yeah, I mean, the quality is wonderful. The price is right. Typically, so we're selling product in to patients in the UK, Germany, Australia, and Canada, just to focus on Europe right now, especially the UK. So the UK is such a small patient population, and the reason it falls over is because of the freshness. So how do you guys think about that in terms of getting product to market as quick as possible?
So I mean, that's very valid points. It's when you look at quality, there's essentially two different quality parameters. There's the big Q quality for the pharmaceutical side, for the regulatory side, and then there's quality with a small q, which is the organoleptic properties, the effects, the color, the size, all of those. There's inevitably always going to be an interplay between quantity and quality. And if you can manage to maximize both, you're doing very well. And that is what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to produce quantity that is also of a high quality. In terms of getting it to the market as quickly as possible, it's just about trimming fat. I mean, it's about being as efficient as possible in terms of production, making sure we don't drag any process out longer than it needs to, slotting in production as quickly as possible behind one another so that there isn't an empty room standing for a long period of time. And then also on top of that, I guess it would be really understanding the regulatory requirements of the different markets, doing the administration, which is usually what takes the longest period of time, doing that as proactively as possible, the import permits, export permits, making sure the COAs are gotten as soon as possible, ensuring production is clean and effective so you're not running into deviations and issues arising from failed batches. So all of these things allow you to get the product from us, the producer, to the end consumer as quickly as possible. But it is absolutely, I wouldn't say the downfall of commercial, but it is the distinguishing factor between what somebody can do at home in a small space very quickly and what we have to do at a large scale and international. It is absolutely getting it out there while it's still fresh is paramount to what is both quality in a small queue and quality in a big queue.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, that's what we're all trying to work toward, is getting products quicker into the hands of the patient so that they can enjoy them in their best fashion. So yeah, I mean, we're all working at this problem to get products in quickly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I guess you've spoken about it a bit, but maybe you can go back into what are the ethos behind the way you guys grow? What principles guide your day-to-day actions and, how you guys operate?
Sure. I would say something that we, particularly as the cultivation team, we live and die by it is just incremental, constant improvement. If that means shaving an hour off of a process, if that means finishing a process a day before we normally would, all of these things just make production quicker and faster. It saves time and labor. It allows us more time for other tasks that we don't necessarily always have the time that we wish we had for. Absolutely, just small incremental improvements. I think a lot of people in the industry believe in these silver bullets that can solve all their problems and increase terpene production and quadruple yield, suddenly you're getting 45% THC. That doesn't exist. What exists is just incremental improvements, and the sum of those 1% improvements eventually result in an overall massive improvement. And I can vouch for it. I mean, if I look at our production schedules from 4 years ago, and I look at the output we were achieving and the quality we were achieving, it is not even a fraction of what we're achieving now, simply because we've improved every single increment, every single step that we're going through. And as you mentioned, it's the devil's in the details. I mean, we look at a flowering room and it's 800 square meters, but there's 800 square meters of improvement to be made. So moving the irrigation lines off of the table, small things like that, they make an absolute massive difference. And so that's the core of our being is just always do better than we did yesterday. even if it's a tiny bit, that will eventually in the long run lead to massive, massive improvements. Another thing is obviously also I mentioned the DIY attitude. I mean, we like to do it ourselves because that means you're intimate with the knowledge, you're intimate with equipment, you know what the problem is, you understand it, and you're trying to fix it from within. And that is so incredibly valuable. If you understand your problems, you can fix your problems. It's very hard to bring in an external source to look at a problem and they're not seeing it holistically as if you were the person experiencing that every single day. So the DIY attitude is also like, we like to do it ourselves. Might take longer. We may make mistakes, but in the end, we end up with the exact right solution for our setting, for our people, for our processes. And that is, again, fundamental to how we perform. It is so, so critical. And then lastly, it's for me being a cost-effective producer at scale. I need to produce the highest quality and the highest quantity at the lowest cost constant. I need to always be aware of my inputs. One of these silver bullets, are we paying the green tax because it's somehow related to cannabis when I can get the same product for a tenth of the price from an agricultural entity? These small things add up. And when you're producing at scale, you need to take every single factor into account and be as effective as possible and as lean as possible. And that's very, very core to me.
Okay. And then what, in terms of the genetics, when you guys are choosing new genetics, I know obviously you're going to choose something that is as hardy as it possibly can be and can live in your environment. But do you typically focus on indica, hybrid, sativa? Is there like, how do you think about genetics when it comes to all the different flavors you can choose, all the different varieties that are out there? There's thousands, hundreds of thousands. And so when you're thinking about putting plants into the ground to do a pheno hunt, what's on the top of your mind?
So, it's such a broad topic. We could talk 3 hours on this. This is one of my favorites.
Yeah, yes.
So essentially it comes down to it needs to perform in our environment. So when we're looking at doing a pheno hunt ourselves, that is month-long processes of just absolutely the finest detail in how we assess the plant on every single characteristic of that plant. I mean, we're looking at how quickly does it root? How quickly does it grow? What is the general shape? Do we need to top it? Do we not need to top it? How many nets does it need to support it? I mean, there's so many factors that we have to take into account. We generally grow a very specific style of plant where it's not too compact, not too dense. We prefer a little bit more stringiness, more airiness to our plants. But that does not necessarily relate to a sativa leaning cultivar. I mean, the whole sativa indica is coming into question. It really is just, does it do well in our environment? And then obviously from a commercial perspective, it needs to tick the boxes commercially. And that generally comes down to COAs reflecting a THC of a minimum 25% is usually what the criteria is that we hunt for. And thankfully also terpenes are coming more and more into play. People are asking more about terpenes. And so we look for 2% and up as sort of our minimal standard when we do our hunts. We do annual pheno hunts. So every year we go through a bunch of seeds that we gather. The seeds are generally selected specifically for traits that we would think would do well. So we look at the parents and we look at the progeny, and then we plant multiple individuals and then we select from those. So how you might have an Olympian basketball player, his sister or her sister or brother may not be even remotely the same to them. And so we can't just depend on them all being brilliant. We like to select from a pool of them. It's super important. So we do large scale hunts. We begin with 50 to 100 seeds and we'll narrow it down to one or maybe two individuals if they tick every single one of our boxes. And it is incredibly rigorous and it is incredibly Darwinian. It's just survival of the fittest. If you're not the best of the best and the creme de la creme, we don't want to grow yet. So that's generally how we select our cultivars. It's first and foremost THC and terpenes. Then we're looking at things like, does it smell the same as anything else in our catalog? I mean, we often want to offer something that's new and fresh and exciting. We like to grow things that no one else is growing. That is also a very powerful element to take into account. If you have a clone supplier that's providing the whole of South Africa with exactly the same genetics, you're inevitably competing with every single other facility for that exact same genetic, unless you're growing it the best out of all of them. But we like to grow something that no one else is growing, because then it's sort of our child and it's ours and it's special, and it feels good. It feels good to grow something incredibly unique. And like you mentioned, there's thousands of options. I mean, there's thousands and thousands of options to choose from. And then on top of that, also, we are at the very cusp of beginning our breeding project. So we have a catalog of genetics that belong to us, none of which were bred by us, but all of them selected by us. We will now take those and then cross them with one another, produce seed as a progeny, and then hunt through the progeny. Because we know what the mom looks like and we know what the other mom looks like. We can then do a reversal. So we basically force a feminized plant to produce feminized pollen. And we can do a reversal pollination and then produce a bunch of offspring from that, which we can then select for, which is incredibly exciting. And that is also something I would talk 7 hours on. It's so, so exciting. Absolutely. The most incredible part of cannabis, I think, is the genetics, in terms of how variable it is and how little we truly understand about that variability and what those combinations of molecules and phytochemicals actually do to people and for people. So it's super exciting.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. We could talk for hours. I mean, having just really come into the cannabis space 5-6 years ago when we started this company and learning about a pheno hunt, I was fascinated at that's how actually things are done. And you end up taking from 100 seeds down to 1 or 2, usually just 1. And then that becomes your mother. And so one thing that I've always had a question on is, so I have all these mothers that are producing clones that are going into veg and, becoming flowering plants. But then how long does the mother, how much genetic identical, what's the word? How genetically identical are like the clones from the mother, and what is the drift there? Because there must be some drift, or is there not? And then I guess secondary to that, how long does a mother live until you have to plant another clone to become the mother? So what is that process like?
Absolutely. So cannabis is a photoperiodic plant. It's an annual plant. So it lives naturally for about 1 year. As long as you're not in the absolute equator, the plant is naturally only meant to live for a year. And photoperiodic means its life cycle is determined by how many hours of light it receives. So if you supply it with excessive light, 18 hours, for instance, is what we do, that tells the plant it is summertime and it shouldn't focus on producing flowers. It is entirely in a vegetative state. You then reduce those hours to 12 hours. So you have a 12-hour light and dark cycle. That tells the plant it's wintertime. And because it's wintertime, I need to produce flowers as quickly as possible because my life is going to come to an end. And my sole purpose on this planet is to produce offspring. And that means I need to produce flowers. So by knowing this, we can have a plant stick around in the vegetative phase by just supplying it with 18 hours of light every single day for the rest of its life. And it can go on indefinitely. The things that will stop the plant from carrying on indefinitely would be the accumulation of pathogens, pests, diseases. There's obviously a limited root space. So all of these factors have to be taken into account. But there's, so many historical examples of plants that have been grown for decades, from people passing clones onto clones onto clones onto clones. There's something called that I think you were trying to describe, which is somoclonal variation. It's slight variations in clonal populations over time. That's usually as a result of, again, pathogen accumulation or general mother health, plants becoming unhealthier over time. And there's this incredible technology called tissue culture, which allows you to take a absolutely tiny portion of cells from the growing tip or the meristem of the plant. And by growing those cells out into a new plantlet, you essentially reset the genetic clock on that. You're taking the stem cells of the plant and you're growing it in its purest, most unadulterated form in a completely sterile environment, which means you don't have those pathogens and pests and diseases. You've taken it from basically the cleanest cell cluster that you can. And that's also a very common way to mitigate things like viruses, which are absolutely rampant in the clone industry and something which so many facilities are facing right now. So what we tend to do is we do a relatively short mother cycle. We have mother plants that we grow for a 4 to 6 month period, and some would even consider that quite long. And then we replace them entirely with new stock from elite mothers, which we keep clean in our indoor space. We also have the tissue culture capabilities. So we, on occasion, take our plant material, we send it through the tissue culture process, bring it back out again as clean mother stock from which to, again, multiply and grow these populations of healthy plants. It's all about keeping your original material as clean and pure and as unadulterated as possible.
Okay. Good explanation. And then another question I had was just about F1 seeds. I live in Portugal, so I was here visiting a greenhouse grower who is now exclusively growing with F1 seeds. And I still can't get my head around it because they just grow from the seed every single time and expect the plants to all be the same, which, given what you're just describing, I don't understand how that works. Could you explain a bit about that?
How much time do you have? No, it's right. I'll give you the executive summary. So, you go to the store and you buy a packet of carrot seeds and you plant them. They almost all perform exactly the same because those are F1 hybrid seeds, which are produced from two genetically distinct parents. And they are so genetically distinct that the outcome of them is predictable every single time. With cannabis, it's a little bit different. We have what we call polyploidy, where you have genes expressing not only from the parents, but sometimes from the grandparents and the cousins and the uncles. And all the plants together have a chance to express their traits, which make it incredibly difficult. On top of that, also, cannabis has this horrible tendency to just want to interbreed and inbreed everything. So if you look at families within the cannabis space, like if you look at the candies, like the Skittles and the Runts and the ice cream cake and the gelatos, they're all so closely related to one another that when you breed one with the other, you end up with a lot of genetic degradation. You end up with a lot of mismatched genetics. And it was very common in the UK in the 1300s or whenever to marry cousins to one another in the royal families. And the whole blue blood definition, that is usually as a result of degrading genetics due to inbreed. So we as an industry have to reach the point eventually where we can breed these lines completely independent of one another, resulting in two completely independent clades. Those two can then be crossed together and you can have F1 hybrids, which are consistent across the whole population. So when I phenohunt, I'm using F1 hybrids, but they're not truly F1 hybrids. They're a polyploidy hybrid from this cross and a polyploidy hybrid of this cross. And this one's actually that one's uncle, and this one's actually related to that one's sister. And so it kind of you're just mixing these genetics together, and then you potentially find a unicorn amongst all of them. And that's sort of like the whole goal of the phenohunt, is you kind of like sift through an animal shelter to try find this like pure breed in between all of these mutts. Eventually, we will reach the point where we are in modern agriculture and every single other crop, where you can buy a packet of seeds, you can plant 10,000 of them, and 9,999 of them will be exactly the same. It's something that people are currently working on. There's a couple of companies around the world which are really pushing for these F1 hybrids to become the new standard, the new norm, because what that does is it eliminates the need for a mother and eliminates the need for clonal propagation like we're doing. And it'll also potentially reduce the things like viruses being passed around in clones and just all of the issues with genetics that we're having in terms of inbreeding and the loss of individual traits and unique traits. So hopefully one day we can get there, but I do really enjoy the lucky packets method of hunting for phenos. It is very fun to open a packet of seeds. There's 10 brothers and sisters, and somehow 8 of them are completely unique to one another. It is fun and it is cool.
It is fun. It's almost like the F1 seeds would kind of take the fun out of cannabis to a certain degree. And I think, the whole commercialization of cannabis is like this slow process of taking the fun out of it to get it more to a pharmaceutical product. But then I think the community just pushes back because it's an unbelievably interesting community, right? I mean, you have to take into account the medical side and then the entire cannabis community and then marry them in this, very strange marriage that is uncomfortable. And it's something that we find all the time. Where do we live in this spectrum in between? Because you have to be in between. If you're on either side, you won't succeed. So
Exactly.
yeah, it's always a very interesting thing, just to kind of keep up with the genetics and understand it. I don't quite understand it even close to the way you do, because you seem like you can speak very well about it as a scientist. But so, what is the one thing you really are obsessed about right now with growing? Is it the genetics or something else in terms of what you guys are doing at Karoo?
So if we decide to go shopping, which is about an hour's drive from here, I put on a podcast and it's generally about cannabis and it's generally about genetics and breeding because I find it absolutely fascinating. It is so unbelievably complex. It has got such a rich history in terms of like the different genetics and where they come from and who found them and how was it bred and who were the parents and who named what and why. I find it absolutely fascinating. I love it. It is my be all and end all. So genetics has always been something that I find so incredibly interesting. And that coupled with trying to get genetics to match production schedules, again, it's how you mentioned, it's this merging of corporate and culture that you need to get that fine line. If you can grow a 35% THC and 4% terpene plant that on a COA is absolutely immaculate, but if it looks like trash and it's not enjoyable and it doesn't have the effect that people want, then what is the point? What is the point of achieving these pharmaceutical standards but having a plant that doesn't do what people want it to do? And then on the vice versa, you can have a plant that is exceptionally beautiful and it is stunning and it smells great and it looks frosty and it's awesome, but it tests incredibly low and it doesn't have the effect that people want either. So it always is a middle ground for the two. So I think genetics in a production setting is for me so incredibly interesting. The second thing that like keeps me up at night is just efficiency. I mean, my cultivation team is 15 individuals. We all have our roles. We all know what we're doing. Everyone's got specific jobs for the day. Everyone knows exactly what they're doing, when, where, and how. And the production schedule is like the 10 commandments for us. We follow it to an absolute key. Like it has to be perfect. And I love seeing how we can improve on processes, shaving an hour off of something that used to take us 4 hours, now takes us 3 hours. A process that used to take us the whole day, now we finish before lunch. It gives our afternoon free to go do inspections in the rooms or to go trim the mother plants. I love that. That for me is absolutely amazing to achieve efficiency, but still have a very high quality output in terms of the process or the general product. I love it. It's those two things tied together are my absolute favorites.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and that was one of the things that really struck me when I was down there is how seriously you guys take that. And I mean, yeah, really for us at Wellford to choose a partner when it comes to the growing side, it's about the growing, it's about the genetics, but it's also about the people there and about the heart that they bring and, just the ethos, because we need to talk to them all the time and we need to do business. And it's like, I think in the cannabis community, putting your heart first a bit in terms of choosing partners is the only way to do it, because when you do it with your brain, it doesn't always work out. So I'm really excited about our relationship, Wellford and Karoo, and really building that globally. Yeah, so it's been wonderful to have you on today. Anything else you want to say about Karoo or any questions for me or anything like that?
Well, I mean, with Karoo Bioscience, you can find us through our website, karoobioscience.com, or you can follow us on LinkedIn and Instagram. We post things quite regularly. And yeah, we love what we do. We take it very seriously. And we still love it at the same time. If you don't love it, it's going to chew you up and spit you out. So like, that's the most important thing is we love what we do. It's such an absolutely rewarding place and career to have. And we're an incredibly special location. And I appreciate my team members and the general company as a whole so much. And we always appreciate having people come out and see the special place that we've built and the special things that we do. It's always lovely having people out and finding incredible people like yourself. It's really rewarding. So I guess, yeah, that's it in a nutshell from our side. Yeah.
Okay. Good man. Thank you, Anton.
Absolutely. Sure. Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Wellford Podcast. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen.